Preservation.
Okay, we are recording. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's program. It's part of our Grassroots Awards this year, the Historic Districts Council, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you as we honor two wonderful groups that in fact allow HTC to do what HTC does best and to help them do what they do best, which is to fight for their neighborhoods. And so we are thrilled to be here. We wish we were here in person. We wish we were all standing around in a garden, sipping wine and talking about this, but instead we're here on Zoom in our 50th year to celebrate the Dorrance Brooks Property Owners and Residents Association and the St. Mark's Independent Block Association. I will go ahead and turn it over to Simeon, who will tell you a great deal more about these wonderful people and what they do and what they've accomplished. Really just here to welcome everyone and to thank you for joining us, and hope to see everybody in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Hi, I'm Simeon, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. My Zoom doesn't work so good, so you're just going to be looking at a little icon of 50 HDC, which is our official 50th anniversary of the Historic Districts Council. As Dan had mentioned, this is our 50th year, and would that we were spending it under slightly different circumstances, but as the case may be, let's make the best of this. We are thrilled to continue our tradition of awarding Grassroots Preservation Awards. The Grassroots Preservation Awards are a long-standing tradition at the Historic Districts Council, and as Dan mentioned, they're a way that we can really take a moment and celebrate and acknowledge, celebrate, recognize, and just hope to lift up and lift awareness of all of the people whom we really depend, both as an organization and as New Yorkers, to help protect the character of their neighborhoods. This year, we are doing this in sort of bits and pieces because nobody wants to spend all of their days on a Zoom. So we are breaking it up into little bite-sized bits. Tonight's bite-sized bits are Dorrance Brooks Property and Homeowners Association and the St. Mark's Independent Block Association and friends, both of whom have
St. Mark's in Manhattan.
been wonderful, wonderful work over a long time, and we are thrilled to be able to honor them. Just to sort of give you a little bit of grounding, although our honorees will give you all that as well. Dorrance Brooks is in Upper Manhattan in Harlem, and the St. Mark's Block Association, when we talk about that, that is in Crown Heights North in Brooklyn, not the St. Mark's Place or any of the other St. Mark's scattered throughout our city or even Italy. I know that we're going to have a pretty complete presentation, so I'm not going to bore you with them, but I would like to thank you all for joining us at HGC. We are also, previous presentations were with Peter Bray, who got the Mickey Murphy Award, and with Nathan Kinzinger, who got our Friend from the Media Award. Both of those are actually saved on our YouTube channel and also at hdc.org if you want to tune in on those and see their presentation, their interesting and compelling presentations, and find out why we're honoring them. I don't know about you all, but it's really strange to sort of be looking at so many faces of friends and at the same time be sitting upstairs in my bedroom basically talking at a computer. I know we should be getting used to it by now, but hopefully this is only a temporary solution. So, and we'll all be together soon. Finally, we do intend to be having some gathering later in the year, or maybe later when it's all safe for us to gather together and toast a glass. Typically, this is a small fee for the event. We're happy and thrilled to offer this for free, although if the spirit does move you, we do suggest we would appreciate any donations to keep us going and keep the lights turned on both at home and in the office. And with that, I will be happy to turn it over to, I believe, Keith, you're going first in this?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Keith Taylor.
Yes, so I want to thank, the Historic Districts Council, and Simeon and Daniel. I want to thank you for this opportunity to really talk about a very important part of New York City. Has a strong relevance to not just New York City, to the United States during its formation, as well as to African American culture and history as well. I'll start with my presentation. I just have to go right to the share screen here, and hopefully everyone can see that. And that is a picture of the Mount Calvary United Methodist Church, built in 1898, currently slated for destruction. This picture was taken 2 years ago, so it is still standing, but it is one of the treasures that we're going to lose without intervention. And so I will get right into what, come on. There we go. My computer is acting up a little bit. So Dorrance Brooks Property Owners and Residents Association is named after Dorrance Brooks. He was a Harlem Hellfighter. He fought in World War I in France and was killed fighting valiantly against the enemy. And when he died just a few weeks before the end of World War I. In 1925, the city of New York saw fit to name a square after him, the Dorrance Brooks Square, which is, by all accounts, the first public square or park to be named after. We're very proud of the legacy of the Harlem Hellfighters and also of Dorrance Brooks being a Harlem native specifically. Back in April 2012, the local community board, of which I'm a member of, created a comprehensive historic preservation plan. And in this historic preservation plan, this was created because there was a realization that in many brown and black communities, there is a lack of historic preservation that has taken place. And so this was an effort to try to hold on to, the historic and important cultural components of Harlem that still exist. So there were 9 areas that were identified, and we are number 2. For some reason, there's a bit of a lag. As I press the slide shift button, it seems to take a little bit of time. So I'm going to work on that as I talk. So number 2, we were, I don't know if you can sort of make out from that, from the screen, but we're basically, our boundaries include St. Nicholas Park to the west, Frederick Douglass Boulevard to the east, 140th Street, there we go, 140th to 136, north and south. And here's a closer picture. You can see St. Mark's Church as it was first built almost 100 years ago on the lower left, and an example of some of the architectures of the homes in the area. We are fortunate in that over the last 130 years, these homes have not been destroyed in place of new housing. And so that is what we're currently fighting to preserve now, because up until at least March, there was very severe developmental pressures to take away our historic neighborhood bit by bit. And so if this will cooperate with me, I'll be able to, okay. King's Handbook of New York. This is my copy from 1895, and that is my block. And it shows the gas lights. It shows an empty field on either side of our block. One empty field is where a school now exists. The other is, there are now historic properties there. And then you can see in the front of our building, there's an empty little square. That's the Dorrance Brooks Square. And it was eventually a train station entrance was placed on the northern part of that park, the 135th Street BC line going uptown. That is, and most people don't. This park, you can see the entrance to the train station, that square is historic for the reasons I just mentioned. Now, here's part of the problem. There's this book that came out last year, 2019, Walking Harlem, Ultimate Guide to the Cultural Capital of America. And in it, you can see a picture of a art workshop where a important artist during the Harlem Renaissance, Augusta Savage, built she had an art laboratory there. And this is her in front of it, a book that came out. Incredible talents, her impact on artists during that time, her students, including Jacob Lawrence, Robert Blackburn, Norman Lewis, they learned there in that building, which is right behind my house. This is what it looks like now. It's in the process of being torn down. And the house that you saw in that picture a few slides ago is this empty lot. It was torn down despite, the protests about the importance historically of this. And it's just one example. This is what it will be replaced with.
Yeah.
And I can show you in real life, this is one block north, 137th Street, where we had another historic building torn down. And this is replaced with. So the writing on the wall. This is the view from City College. And you can see down the hill, the Mount Calvary United Methodist Church I mentioned. And you can see some of the other parts of the historic district that we have we've claimed. Oops. And so this is another picture closer to when the 1910, closer when the church was built. It looks the same as it did 100 years ago. It really does deserve to be, there it is now. It really does deserve to be preserved. It's not just me saying that. Through our efforts, we're able to get our district on the federal register, National Register of Historic Places, and it's also been named a state historic district. And I should back up a little bit and talk about the importance of the Historic Districts Council. The Historic Districts Council was instrumental through Simeon coming and coming to our forum when we were just a block association. We didn't really know how to preserve anything. He came and he spoke about the options that were available. Yuan Chen from the West Harlem Community Preservation Organization came and spoke to us about the importance of getting a historic preservationist to document the histories of these buildings, the architecture, the importance, and then the cultural aspect of it as well. And we were able to do those things and submit a document that the historic preservationist prepared. And within 6 months, we got approval as a state historic district. And 2 months after that, we were approved for the National Register of Historic Places. However, we are not landmarked by the city, and so we are just as vulnerable to our homes being torn down as we were before this effort began. And it really is important, not just because of what I talked about, but if we are named, we're currently under consideration, if we are named a city landmarked historic district, it will be, to my best knowledge, the first historic district named after African American, the first one. And so we want to continue with our efforts. I don't know if, I think I see that I have myself on a timer and it's 6:20. Oh, so I have 10 more minutes. Great. I thought I was out of time. We did, this is the eligibility, historic district eligibility study that the historic preservationist did. You can see her name down there, Marissa Marvelli. Wonderful, wonderful professional, and really came through. We put everything that we've done on our webpage so that people can see what our efforts have been, and they can look and figure out how they can do it themselves. This is, I took a page from the preservation, the report that she created. And you can see we're surrounded by historic districts. So Strivers Row to our east, City College to our west. Alexander Hamilton's house is right up the hill, as well as the Hamilton Heights Historic District. And so clearly there is a precedent that's been set many years ago, because a lot of these locations were designated historic districts decades ago. And so there's just another picture. This is on our webpage, which I'm going to show a picture. I mean, the last slide shows the actual web address if anybody wants to look for themselves. This is another church, Grace Congregation Church on West 139th Street, which has an important history like the other buildings around it. It is designated to be torn down and replaced with residential apartments. That's the last article I saw about it. The congregation is looking to use the formula. It's become so common in communities to destroy their churches and replace it with housing, presumably affordable housing. But nonetheless, it's at a terrible price. Okay, I'm just waiting for the PowerPoint to catch up to me. Hopefully it'll start to move. But I just have additional pictures of our area showing the different types of styles of the row houses, for everything from neo-Renaissance to Romanesque. And this area was recently in a film that won an Oscar called If Beale Street Could Talk. They filmed various scenes in our area because it is, this part of Harlem is really reminiscent of the beautiful parts of Harlem that people don't get to see much. And so, unfortunately, it looks, oh, there we go. I should have just used my mouse. So here's what I was talking about, Neo-Renaissance. This is where if Beale Street could talk specifically, I think the second building from the right. And here you can see some of the cultural ties. Up on the top, you can see Langston Hughes on top of 580 St. Nicholas Avenue, which is part of our historic district, with a number of socialites and folks of importance during the Harlem Renaissance period. During that time, they had a Sunday brunch, as they often did. And on the bottom picture is President Truman in front of Dorrance Square, right on 136th Street and Edgecombe Avenue, where he was talking about in 1948, besides his re-election, he was talking about desegregating the armed forces. He came back in 1952 to the same Dorrance Square. Back then, they did know the significance of Dorrance Brooks as an American soldier of African-American descent during a time of Jim Crow and during the time of 1919, the Red Summer, where soldiers coming back were lynched in their uniforms for refusing to submit to discrimination. You have other photos on the top far left. That is a picture of the last building. It was actually, it has an interesting history as being Edgecombe Sanitarium, which was a hospital that was created 100 years ago by 17 African-American physicians who were not able to practice at Harlem Hospital. So they created their own hospital. They combined two buildings. And one of the doctors was the first physician to take up residence eventually in Harlem Hospital, Dr. May Edward Chin. She was the first African-American woman to receive a medical degree from Bellevue Medical College. And of course was the first African-American woman to intern and serve at Harlem Hospital. And for a time, she was the only African-American female physician working in Harlem. And it's currently, as you can see in the picture, under a state of renovation. There are additional pictures of the various blocks. Here's a postcard of what Edgecombe Sanitarium looked like when it was an actual hospital. And this is the same block. It's a shameless pitch at my own house, which is the second one from the left, which I'm very proud of. Though that row was built in 1886, and this is the article in the Times that really talked about how that the developer at that time built not just our row, but the whole square, the whole square blocks. And there's another New York Times article that talked about the Alexander Hamilton House, which was at that time, this was 18 years ago, was right next to the St. Luke's Church. It was eventually moved on wheels into the park nearby. And so I think I finished my presentation with 3 minutes to spare. And this is our webpage where there are the videos of the various forums we've had that basically go from the start 2 years ago to where we are today. And some of those videos, we've had representatives from the state come down and talk about the credits that we've been able to take advantage of for repairs of our homes. I was able to fortunately put a solar panel system on the house, on my home, using the historic tax district credits. So, I think that is about it.
Thank you very much, Keith. We'll actually, I'm going to circle back to you after the other presentation, because I'm going to have a few questions for you. And I do ask if anybody has questions for Keith or for our other awardees, just put them in the chat, and we'll answer them after the presentation. Thank you so much. It's such a beautiful, beautiful area. And all your work really being a great steward of this place. And it's terrible, the sort of development pressure that you're laboring under. I mean, that's as terrible as the time we're living in now. Almost this pause gives us a moment to like appreciate what we have, because otherwise it was coming down really strong.
Absolutely. And I have to thank the Historic Districts Council, because they were really instrumental in helping us figure out how to move forward, and how to actually take steps that would lead to preservation of our neighborhood. So important.
That's very kind. We'd also be remiss not saying to thank you for all the help for you and Shin and her group. I'm not sure if it was the West Harlem Homeowners Association or the other, which is a very similar name that she did.
Yeah, I think it's the West Harlem Community Preservation Organization.
Right. Okay. So thank you. So we will get back on, and we've got some questions, but now it is my pleasure to introduce Shirley, Derek, and Ethel, who are going to tell us a sort of a very important story from the Crown Heights North neighborhood in Brooklyn, and what they have been doing to help preserve their historic area. Just, and I don't want to jump on anybody's presentation, but the Crown Heights North is one of the larger historic districts in Brooklyn now, I believe, and Ethel can correct me. I think that it's around 1,200 buildings or so.
I think you're right. Might be 1,400.
Might be 1,400. And that has been really happened only since 2003? 2007. Look at me. I'm trying to think it's longer than it actually is. So, but they got together they formed in 2001, 2002, and they've been doing just stalwart work the last 18 years. in helping to preserve their neighborhood. But one of the secrets that we always have to say is, and one of the things, our axioms is that designation is not the end, that it's after you're designated, that's when the work. So I will turn it over to Ethel, Shirley, and Derek, please.
Shirley's going to go first, I believe.
Yes, I'm going to go first. But before I start, I would just like to say that I was christened in that church, and I was really quite surprised to hear what was going on with it. Really.
Wow.
Anyway.
Wow, small world.
Really. And also, before I start my presentation, I want to say that on behalf of the St. Mark's Avenue Independent Block Association, I want to take this time to thank you for presenting us with this award. And we're very excited to be included as one of this year's recipients. And first, I wish to thank the Historic District Council and the Grassroots Preservation Association for selecting us for this recognition. And we are truly grateful and honored. Okay, now with my presentation. The St. Mark's Avenue Independent Block Association, also known as SAMIBA, began in the early 40s. Members met at each other's homes until 2002, when the meetings were held at the Dean Sage Mansion. Dean Sage is the oldest mansion in Crown Heights North. It is the last remaining mansion with its original formal parterre garden. It has been said that Mark Twain stayed there in 1875, testing out his written work to his good friend, Dean Sage. The move to conduct meetings there was initiated by the president at that time, who was also a member of the board of ICL, the owners of the Dean Sage Mansion. We were meeting in a warm, hospitable atmosphere. Their officers occasionally sat in on our meetings, and we took part in their annual Halloween festivities, notified the community to join in and experience an enjoyable relationship prior to having a block fair. Our final meetings of the year in June were held, weather permitting, in the garden, with our members sharing dishes and refreshments. When we began having block fairs, ICL asked if they could participate. They joined our annual block fair, providing food, some music, and several vendors. In March of 2017, Community Board A called to verify that ICL had spoken to us or notified us of the changes that they intended to make. We had known nothing about this. So therefore, this was the first that we heard of their intentions. The Dean Sage Mansion stood as a symbol, reminder of a neighborhood which was for many years servicing the community as a place to meet, discuss neighborhood problems, seek resolutions, and share holiday festivities with the children of the community. We, the St. Mark's Avenue Independent Block Association, are hoping that one day in the future, a cultural center will be established there in which the youth and seniors can enjoy and participate in the arts, music, and drama. The garden will be open to the public for concerts, lectures, and plays. As our motto states, we are striving towards the good and welfare of our community. We were disheartened when ICL chose to fabricate the truth rather than disclose the exact purpose of their approach to Community Board 8. The letter, which was sent to arrange the meeting with SAMIBA and ICL, claimed that they wanted to make some improvements. However, upon meeting, we were informed that they wanted to construct 2 apartment buildings, use most of the garden, and initially change the structure of the Dean Sage landscape. We were highly upset and truly disappointed with this proposal. Derek?
Yeah, thank you, Shirley. Hey guys, I'm Derek Hilberts. I'm a resident of the block, one of the Johnny-come-latelys in the neighborhood. We've only lived here for 8 years. Nonetheless, so some of this stuff is new to me, and I'll apologize if I'm a little ham-fisted in some of what I say. I'm not well versed in a lot of these structures, but I try to call it like I see it. It is indeed a big honor. Thank you very much, HTC, for this recognition, but it is indeed also a large community effort. The entire SMEBA group was on this from the start. I'm sort of the guy who just filed the initial paperwork to get the Article 78 in because I saw something I could aim for to make a difference. And thankfully, I was pretty ignorant of the process because it's not pretty at times. But with the incredible guidance of Ethel, we got the Article 78 in under the wire. And so this is challenging the ruling that the LPC had already made, which I thought was plainly outrageous, to be honest. And we would have never gotten this far, by the way, without the incredible efforts of our attorneys. They really did the heavy lifting down the stretch here. It bears noting that we had taken one attorney who took our retainer and did nothing. We talked to another pretty powerful attorney who said, "You'll never win this, not going to take it." And then through Ethel's efforts, we came to Jackie McMickens and especially Philip Solomon, who really made this work and continues to be on the case, which is incredible. Huge gratitude to all of them. So I think most of y'all probably know what the situation was, what Shirley just outlined a bit. The plan was to build a rather huge couple of structures out of character onto the property, wrapping the freestanding mansion and towering over it on two sides while obliterating the still original formal garden. Descriptions of that proposed structure as deferential mansion with 2 stories above it and obscuring sides were, I mean, absurd on the face of it, and I thought offensive. That this kind of stuff can be said in public meetings is just, it's crazy, defies logic. As Shirley noted, we believe this to be the last freestanding mansion with original grounds mostly intact in central Brooklyn. This sort of property truly is the very reason we need a functional LPC. Sadly, this case became an example of exactly how the LPC's mission, in my own opinion, has been undermined and redirected as a lever to promote development in previously protected areas. No mistake, this was a watershed effort to show that our landmarking designations can indeed be overcome to allow development on and in protected. As soon as the LPC allowed this development, we heard in the hallways at the courthouses, the buzz was that Dean Sage was an example of how we can get past landmarking, that this can be done. This is, I mean, I'm sure there are other similar examples, but to my mind, this is a very important moment in how central Brooklyn is developed. Oddly, the LPC's ruling seemed to hinge largely on the proposed use of some of the units as affordable housing. Thankfully, Judge Levine did see through this and recognize that the LPC is not in the business of making decisions based on uses such as affordable housing. Judge Levine also seemed to recognize the value of the garden as part of the architecture, as the thing that defines the mansion for what it is as a freestanding structure. In an entire area, our entire neighborhood used to be defined by these. It's sort of the last of these. My own note in writing to the court was that this is a space that defines the form, was quoted in her ruling. Now, I'm not only flattered by the use of that quote in the ruling, but I also happen to think it may help provide a different watershed for us. I'm hoping this ruling can help define our precious properties in our area as part of a larger whole. It's not just a question of architectural stylings, historical terminologies, the brick type used, or whether the windows are made of wood or aluminum. It's about context. I'm hoping Judge Levine's Dean Sage ruling can eventually be quoted to make exactly that argument for preservation at large. In parallel, I'd like to add that the affordable housing question had our neighborhood cast publicly as a bunch of NIMBYites. Nothing could be further from the truth. We absolutely recognize the need for more and better and more affordable housing right here in our neighborhood. The thing is, there are many moribund properties where such could be built. As part of our arguments before the court, we named quite a few. A little bit of responsible city planning can go a long way in neighborhoods like ours. It even bears mention that the owners of the Dean Sage Mansion, the ICL, own approximately 12 other properties in Brooklyn, none of which are landmarks protected, and any of which might be well suited to redevelopment for a net gain of many more units than were ever proposed at this one location. We're not against responsible development. We even welcome it, but it's simply not necessary to irrevocably destroy absolutely unique moments of our shared history to do it. And what this really reveals, I think, is that this was ultimately a play for profit, a nonprofit looking to profit from the best property it owns on the monopoly board. Ultimately, this is what I objected to more than anything else. And with that, we have also to be very aware that this is not over. This case is on appeal still. It may take a year or two, but we have to stay awake and active, or all of this effort is for naught, and many other destructive developments will be more easily green-lighted. The more precedents they have, the more this stuff happens. I'm sure that Ethel will speak to that as well in a moment, because we have ongoing similar efforts right nearby, but we have to keep on it. I appreciate everyone's efforts at all times. And with that, I thank you for the attention, and I give you my personal guru herself.
Thank you, Derek. And thank you, HDC, for doing this. Without HDC's guidance, the Crown Heights North Association would not have achieved very much of anything. When Simeon attends the Crown Heights North Association general membership meetings, I introduce him as our preservation godfather. And they've guided us tremendously. I hate to say it, but most of what I've prepared is a repeat of what Derek just recited and what Shirley provided for you. So I don't want to be redundant. I just like to add to that ICL is learning a hard lesson. And what I'm advocating for now, going forward, is to speak with our council and ask him to initiate discussions with the owner for a transfer of ownership to a community group we can help identify to save the building as a senior citizens residence, because the feds have money available for senior housing, and a joint use as a community group, which is in line with SMEBA's recommendation. We're also in Crown Heights North facing a second challenge for a nearby religious facility. It's owned by a church, but it used to be the old Methodist home at 920 Park Place. So that's the next fight we will be undertaking in Crown Heights North. And I mention it because we're in the run-up now. As Derek and I learned the hard way, we need to wait for LPC to make their misstep. They made a misstep with Dean Sage by announcing in their deliberations that they had to get this housing done. Housing is not LPC's purview, so that should be a hands down win at the appellate division, the second department, when arguments are made in late August, and we expect a decision by the end of the year. I doubt if LPC will make that same mistake again going forward, but it's obvious that the pressure is on for the church, for the Dorrance Brooks Church. The attraction is the nearness to public transportation. So Central Brooklyn is a target because we have 2 train lines, one on the north and one on the south, the I&D, the IRT, running east and west. And then going north and south, we have about 6 bus lines. So everybody wants to live in Central Brooklyn now. Crown Heights North. where the population is aging, the children have moved away or they're disinterested, and the elderly property owners don't know how to maintain their property with the funds that they have coming in. So we can work that with the historic preservation tax credits, but for a not-for-profit or for a church, they have to rejigger how they own their property to take advantage of those things. So we're constantly looking for new ways to make working with the community attractive to these two current owners. One is Institute for Community Living, the other one is Northeastern Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. They're really huge up and down the East Coast. They're looking at getting $23 million for their property at 920 Park Place. So we're trying to come up with ways to work with them, to use the existing building for senior housing, maintain the open space, and not build 182 apartments in the back lot that they've created over the past couple of years. So that is a continuation of what Shirley and Derek have presented to you, and it sort of dovetails with what's happening to the church. One of my questions on the Dorrance Brooks property would be if it's still owned by a church, by a religious organization, if you'd care to say.
Absolutely. It was sold a number of years ago to a private developer. The sale appeared in the New York Times. And so they have every intention of tearing it down and putting up a glass and steel square box. And they actually have a sure page, so they have no concerns at all about destroying the church or the two historic brownstones next to it, which is part of the deal.
Well, thank God you have a study that you can wave in front of LPC, and your council member has to step up.
Indeed.
The council member needs to be front and center, and then your assembly members, or if it's spread out, looks like you have more than one representative on every level for that, but that's another conversation.
Yes.
I don't have much more to add, Simeon.
I just want to thank you. I want to sort of put a big bow on your triumph, despite the fact that the city's taking on appeal, of how important that case was. Because if that decision by the Landmarks Commission, which gave permission for a certificate of appropriateness to do a very inappropriate, by their own standards, development in the Dean Sage land around the Dean Sage mansion, then what those guys were talking about in the hallway is true, and that was just a good way to get around, what the LPC should be doing by using the magic wand of the magic words affordable housing. And no one's against affordable housing, but it still needs to fit in within the context of the neighborhood, and that you came together and actually successfully pushed back on that really has had effect on the LPC and on the de Blasio administration's way of looking at development in historic areas. So that's a really important thing, regardless of the final outcome. And I think that we're seeing, as you mentioned, the 920 Park Place, the Mount Hebron development, it was supposed to be heard before Landmarks, a week ago or next week. And because the developers are being kind of squirrely and didn't want to show it to the full community board, but the community raised a fuss, the Landmarks Commission said, no, you've got to see it. This is the biggest development coming to Crown Heights North ever, and you've got to show it to the whole community board, and it's been pushed off until September because it's not like they're going to break ground tomorrow anyway. So I think that's a really important success for community politics. So we're really pleased that you were able to get as far as you are, and pleased to continue to support your efforts to continue to bring this home. Something that both the Dorrance Brooks Square area and Crown Heights North are dealing with are these problems of development on these religious properties. that, and that's something you see all across the city, but particularly in areas that have large religious institutions that are not, that for reasons are not good stewards or don't have the financial wherewithal to kind of keep their places up, and people come knocking on the doors, and it's a real problem, because even for those of us who aren't necessarily churchgoers, you define your space through these institutions. I know that in Manhattan, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer has talked about trying to get that together, trying to get a group of people together to talk about religious institutions, and our colleagues at the Landmarks Conservancy try to do a lot of work on it. It's an endemic problem, and I don't know what the real solution is. But it's also terrible that these properties that are so important to communities that have actually benefited from not having to pay taxes can then cash out.
I want to bring one thing forward. Recently from Enterprise, I believe it was, that Netflix is giving $100 million for community development in Black communities. So I will be checking that out to see when their RFP comes out to ask for funding for that old Methodist home to become a new Methodist home for the, not Methodist, but for senior citizens. I think to save that open space, that's one thing we can do. And as I may have said earlier, there is funding available for that.
And that's the good kind of funding. Now, I remember Keith at the meeting, and people also in your neighborhood have brought up to me the concerns around opportunity zones.
That's exactly what I was going to mention. And the concern was that it appeared to be a not well thought out program with very little accountability in terms of how it was used in poor communities, particularly communities of color, in terms of undermining preservation efforts. And so I don't know that it's something that has really had much of an effect at this point, given everything that's happened. But the stories that came out from the media were not positive about how it was being abused, or just not really done in a way that was helping preservation efforts.
Or helping the community. I mean, I remember also talking to folks up in your neighborhood, and I think you said you've got like 150, 180 properties within your National Register District?
Yes, actually about 126.
Okay.
In our
and I remember you may have mentioned it, or one of your colleagues, that in the last 3 or 4 years, a third of them have been bought up by LLCs.
Yes, we discovered that when we did our mail campaign to notify all of the homeowners that the state historic preservation effort was taking place, as well as the federal. And according to the city records, many of them have become LLCs. Presumably for tax benefits for the homeowners, but the other aspect of that is just investors that are looking to flip the home at some point and then sell to developers.
Yeah, I mean there's fears of gentrification, and then there's the very real realization that corporations are buying up your neighborhood.
Right. And it's not good to not know who your neighbor is. It's not good to try to have a block association meeting. Corporations not going to walk in the door. So, go ahead.
Has that been happening also in Crown Heights North, Derek and Shirley and Ethel? I do remember that there was an Australian firm that was getting pretty active in Bedford-Stuyvesant at one point, buying up townhouses.
Well, the same entity or similar entity that bought St. Gregory's School with the crack running from the rooftop down to the ground floor, 4 stories, that's the same group that bought Denise Brown's old building across the street from me on Sterling Place in New York Avenue. So they're scouting. I see people every day with the cameras and the binoculars looking to invest. And if they hit a bump, they get stuck, and then the building sits for years with the roof going in, caving in, and it becomes a problem. So I'm trying to figure out a way to pull them together and say, okay, we can help you develop something we can live with too, but you got to work with us. So that'll be my, now that I'm retired, I can come up with all this stuff. But
it's a corporation's worst fear, a retired articulate person.
But they're out there and they have the staff and the money to do the research and gather up. But we at the community board, we have a Brooklyn Neighborhood Improvement Association is going to be willing to work with us to offer options to the owners of these two large properties so that they can get out, because we're going to promise them to continue to litigate. And as our current Attorney General told me once, sometimes the threat of litigation is even better than the actual litigation, because we can drag it out for a long time, show up in court in numbers, and it slows the process down to the point where the shrinking revenue makes the owner want to walk away. And at that point, we need to have something to offer them so that they can walk away and the community can pick up where they're leaving off and bring it to a wonderful, useful conclusion that is more community oriented and permanent tenant oriented. And it'll save the city money too. Rather than having people go into shelters, they can go into permanent residence in these buildings that we hope we can be able to save.
That's great. I'm so sorry that you have to do it, but it's great that you're doing it.
I'd just like to say that letters are constantly sent out and phone calls about, we'd like to buy your home. And I actually heard of one neighbor told me that someone wanted to come into her house to see it.
What?
He says, I'm not selling. What do you want here? You know, so these are the types of things that we're going through.
One thing also I just heard, just with regards to funny connections. I mean, I think surely it's wonderful that you were baptized, you're christened in that church up in Dorrance. Now, Ethel, you also did combined tax credits with solar panels for your roof, didn't you?
Yes, and I'm still enjoying the benefits. Every year I get $400 or $500 on my off my taxes, just for the solar.
That's really remarkable. And was it a pain in the neck to go through? Keith, was it a pain in the neck to go through the sort of hoops of getting those credits?
Well, I think part of it depends on the financing, how it's financed. So that can really determine how simple the process can be. But there are significant financial benefits for using historic tax credits, not just for something like solar panels, but for maintenance of your home. So I really think that's why so many folks that know about what historic preservation, the benefits are, why they try to get their areas listed, because they know that there are significant financial benefits from the state, from the city, if you are a historic district. And as well, there should be, because the resources should be devoted to preserving these buildings that are worthy of being shared into future generations.
Well, I'd just like to add that the flip side of preservation is good for government, because you call it tourism. And if there's an M1, an M2, and an M3 that goes along with having bus tours and walking tours, traipsing through your neighborhood and spending dollars locally, that just helps to support the entire concept of historic preservation. I believe that if you look at the preambles on all three levels of preservation law, the word tourism is up there in that first paragraph.
You are completely correct. And, you know, the Historic Districts Council's offices are in the St. Mark's Historic District in the East Village. And we have at least 2, maybe 3 film shoots a year going on there. And in Dumbo, in Brooklyn, occasionally they have to give 6-month moratoriums just to give the residents a break from all the film shoots.
See that?
Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? If so, please feel free to put them in the chat. Does anybody do anyone have anything, you know, that we didn't get to that you want to add? I think this is just it's been such a very good conversation.
Well, I apologize for not having as many pictures as I should have had. The next time I'll have photos.
Not a problem. Next time we'll all get together and actually be able to have a glass of something nice also.
True.
All right. Well, thank you all so very, very much for sharing your evening with us. I hope everyone stays well, stays cool, stays healthy, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. I should know the next thing that we have up on the calendar. I'm sure Michelle can tell us all, but check out our website at htc.org. Unless, Michelle, would you like to say something?
I was just going to say thank you to everyone. And this is actually the last thing that we have scheduled, but we will have more virtual walking tours scheduled soon.
So thanks so much. Have a great summer, and we'll be talking with you often, and look forward to seeing all of you in person shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.